welcome to all of you here today. Great to see particularly so many EIC members here. EIC is first and foremost a member-driven organisation, and I do think it's really good to have a day like this where we can come together and discuss the context that you're all operating in, some of the issues ahead of us, and share and exchange ideas and best practice. I don't want to take up too much time because we've arranged, as the previous speakers have said, a pretty packed programme, but just wanted to say a bit about the political context we're operating within, and then share some survey feedback we've done, asking EIC members how EIC can support them. So political context first. I guess if I was to sum up 2015 politically for the environment, the word bracing comes to mind. And why is that? Well, partly, of course, because unfortunately most mainstream politicians don't see a huge advantage in being very, very closely identified with environmental issues, the environmental sector, and particularly disappointing that Sadiq Khan couldn't be with us today, because of course we'd invited him and he'd accepted the invitation as a chance to have that dialogue. But if you're wondering why it is that most mainstream politicians are wary about getting too much on the front foot on the environment, I think you have to remember what the last coalition government's experience was. So I think politically, the big issues in the last Parliament on the environment were wind farms, the endless debates about the NIMBY factor, were wind farms high cost, low cost, whatever. Who can forget the bin wars, which saw Eric Pickles on one side lined up against most local authorities, Caroline Spellman, the Environment Department, and all the arguments about weekly collections, the forestry sell-off fiasco, the Green Deal being promoted as a flagship government policy year after year, and then just recently unceremoniously ditched. And I think there's a feeling among many ministers in the current government that the environment just isn't good politics. It tends to lead to bad publicity, doesn't really get them more votes. And if you look at the illustrious list of recent Secretaries of State, so there they are going back to 2005, I think you probably have to go back to David Miliband, which was, 10 years ago, to find a politician who actually enhanced their career and came out of the Environment Department in a better place, a more powerful place than they went in. And I think those are the factors as well influence politicians. With Liz Truss, to be fair, jury very much still out, but I'm quite struck by how, although Liz had said some interesting things about the role of big data, smart data in understanding environmental issues, she tends to steer clear of most of the environmental topics in DEFRA, and she leaves that to Rory Stewart, who we're going to hear from later this morning, and she tends to talk about the rural economy, productivity, agriculture, all important issues, but I think no accident she tends to identify herself with that part of the DEFRA world. And then if you look at the current concerns of ministers, James has mentioned energy already. There's this great debate about the energy trilemma. Can we really combine energy security, low prices for consumers, low carbon emissions? I think my feeling is it isn't too hard to design a system that could do that, but actually trying to implement that system at one remove through a very complex set of mechanisms, trying to influence a range of investors to invest in different types of plants, has pretty much proved beyond the ability of any recent government to do that. We had Amber Rudd's speech yesterday, the Energy Reset. I thought, James, your blog yesterday with the 10 unanswered questions that the speech left was spot on, and we were saying earlier it could actually have been 20 unanswered issues that we still haven't resolved. Red tape, we still unfortunately have a government, like most recent governments, who the moment they're accused of being anti-business, reach for the red tape cutting scissors. Now, not all regulation is good. There's regulation which is not pragmatic, not easy to implement. But particularly in our sector, most regulation is vital in ensuring and driving high environmental standards and in promoting business opportunities for the green economy. And then looming behind it, of course, we have the whole debate about the EU referendum. And I'm looking forward very much to the debate we've got coming up in a moment or two about the EU referendum, the effect it might have on the environmental sector. Having said all that, I think there are some reasons to be cheerful. We have economic growth. Growth is around, 2% a year, so roughly trends just below, and that must be good for a business community. Secondly, exports. We have a government which is desperate to increase UK export levels, and I think that's a great opportunity for us in the environmental sector. The work EIC does overseas talking to potential markets about environmental expertise in the UK, you always tend to find UK expertise in this area has a good reputation. And I think with the government's determination to drive exports, that's an opportunity. Air quality, as James mentioned, EIC campaigned for several years. At long last, we're taking it seriously. That must be a good thing. Brownfield development is back in vogue. Again, that must be important for companies in that sector. If we're going to have a housing boom, let's try and make sure it's as far as possible on previously developed land. And infrastructure. We have a government determined in the next 5 years to upgrade UK infrastructure, whether we're talking about HS2, airport expansion, housing, Crossrail 1, Crossrail 2. Now, I think some big debates to be won about ensuring that infrastructure is sustainable, and I'm looking forward to the session we've got this afternoon on that very topic. But again, I think some big business opportunities in that. Then EIC members. So we've done some fairly informal survey work in the run-up to today, just to get an up-to-date sense of what's on your minds as members, where you think EIC can make a difference. And at a high level, a couple of positives, a couple of negatives came out. On the positive side, most EIC members are fairly growth-orientated. So a majority, in fact, are planning to take on more staff over the next couple of years. Most have investment intentions roughly stable, but more are increasing investment than plan to decrease it. And about a quarter of the companies we talk to see export growth, so business outside the UK as their main driver. And we're saying a lot of our members are all sizes of business, and we talk to a wide range of companies in doing this survey work. Probably the majority of the respondents were medium-sized UK-based businesses, so I think that's quite significant. On the downside, again, a majority of companies said they were not confident this government was committed to the environment, and I'm sure that's an issue we're going to come back to again and again today, and we'll talk about a lot, no doubt. We'll hear what Rory Stewart has to say. And again, the EU referendum, and two concerns came through there. For some companies was a fear that the referendum, a possible Brexit, might lead to the rolling back of environmental regulation. But for other companies, the regulation wasn't the issue. It was just the fear that the referendum campaign itself, a Brexit if it happened, was destabilising to the economy, destabilising to business. And environmental companies are as vulnerable to that as any companies. So in terms of EIC members and what they want EIC to do on their behalf, on your behalf, no great surprises, but I thought worth just picking up three things in particular. Lobbying came out strongly. Now, lobbying has always been a core part of what EIC does to promote its members, and that very much remains the case. We had a big win this year, having campaigned for several years for a national framework of low emission zones. DEFRA announced in its consultation a couple of months ago it will go ahead with that national framework, renamed Clean Air Zones. On brownfield development, we've got meetings coming up with the DCLG civil servants who are working on the brownfield register and the brownfield fund. That'll be in the housing bill. We'll be lobbying on the housing bill, so really in the thick of the debate on that. And then when there are explicit opportunities where we can really push home an environmental agenda, that's very much what we're looking to do. And I think, as I was saying at the start, at mainstream UK politics, there's limited enthusiasm from the average politician to get on board with this agenda. I think we're going to see a London mayoral campaign which, more than any of the previous London campaigns, really has the environment pretty much centre stage. Obviously, Zach Goldsmith is very much associated with that agenda. Sadiq Khan is very deliberately, I think, emphasising his environmental plans for London. You've got the Evening Standard, the media very much on board, and a real opportunity for EIC and other bodies in this field to make a difference there. Another thing that came through was people saying alongside the lobbying, they wanted us to continue to do thought leadership activity and think about the future issues that will affect the sector, affect society. And I guess the best example of where we're looking to do that is our work on smart cities, and particularly the environmental aspects of smart cities. So on the screen there, that's our calculation of the specifically environmental smart city market. So the money that will be spent on smart city initiatives which are focused on environmental problems, whether that's waste management, air quality, carbon reduction, whatever. Some pretty big numbers there. I'm very keen, EIC is very keen, that EIC members and UK companies can get a bigger share of that market as we possibly can. And because of that, we've done quite a bit of work around this topic, and we've got more work coming up in 2016. There's a summary report in your pack that we've just brought out recently. And my colleague Sam Ibbott, who leads our work on smart cities, can't be with us today because he's actually in Barcelona. Some people have all the luck, don't they? But he's in Barcelona at the World Smart City Congress, where EIC have been invited to talk about the work we've done. There are a lot of people talking about smart cities, not many people talking about the environmental impact of the smart city agenda. And I say, big business opportunity there, which I want EIC members to be able to pick up. And lastly, again, no great surprise, but a real desire from members to see where we can help them make connections, develop their networks internationally as well, develop business opportunities. And again, this is something which we're very much trying to do, particularly internationally, which is something relatively new for EIC. Only in the last couple of years we've really pushed that agenda. But we have a strong partnership with our Chinese partners, the Chinese Society for Environmental Sciences, and through that link we help members, through our MOU with CSCS, we help members get business in China. Earlier this year we achieved accredited trade partner status with UKTI, and we're working closely with UKTI on various initiatives. And I have said to UKTI, I've made an offer to them that we will help them map the market opportunities in overseas countries, because I do feel that where UKTI is very strong in identifying what they call high-value opportunities, the mega contracts, the sort of big city initiatives in Asia and so forth, they're not so strong at identifying the sort of medium-sized opportunities out in those markets which don't qualify for HVO status, where a lot depends on the specific expertise of the UKTI desk officer on the ground. And I think EIC's expertise and knowledge can really help there, and together we can actually map the opportunities outside the UK for members.